my premise today is going to be that we don't have to have PhDs on staff to be able to impact our business through artificial intelligence and machine learning. And that due to the advancements from AWS specifically, this is largely turning into a software development problem now for us to solve. So before we get too deep into the discussion, a little bit about who EagleDream Technologies is. We are an IT consulting company. We're based in Rochester, New York, but we're expanding rapidly all the way down the East Coast into Florida and then moving west towards the Mississippi River. We specialize in helping companies through digital transformation and innovation. We are a group of innovators. A large majority of our staff has an innovation background. Myself, I spent 12.5 years at Xerox Research. We really focus on helping our customers innovate around their business and finding ways to leverage the cloud towards, driving innovation into that business. But we're also a group of builders. So while we can consult and help people with ideas, we can also bring the capability to do that building for our customers. And we're a group of experts. We have 3 AWS ambassadors on staff. We have other people that are highly certified in the cloud and in AWS. Very long tenured people as well with deep backgrounds in software development, AI, ML, data lakes, and other areas. We are also one of the premier cloud native transformation companies in North America, where we are a premier consulting partner with AWS. That badge carries a lot of weight. There's only about 45 premier consulting partners within all of North America. Within the consulting partner community, we hold competencies for things like DevOps, Microsoft workloads on AWS, specifically looking at SQL Server and .NET application modernization. We were a launch partner for the end user computing competency, which focuses on things like VDI and streaming business applications. We are also a launch partner for the well-architected program, where we work with customers to overlay the 5 pillars of well-architected onto their workloads in AWS. Things like operations, security, reliability, performance, and cost. So enough about EagleDream. Let's really dive into this idea of AI and ML. But first we need to look at what are the suite of services that Amazon is providing that is really enabling companies to take, to put AI and ML into their business and drive their business forward. And the key thing here is there's only one service on this list that really requires much knowledge about AI and ML to leverage, and that's Amazon SageMaker. And this has now actually been renamed the SageMaker IDE, where there's a whole integrated development environment now for doing AI and ML work. You dive into SageMaker when some of these prepackaged services from AWS may not be able to answer all the questions that you have, and you need to do some customization. But still, this is primarily a developer problem. This is the suite of services that I like to call the pre-canned AI and ML services from AWS. Things like Comprehend, and there's a derivative of this called Comprehend Medical. Comprehend is all about pulling meaning from text. So things like word clouds, sentiment analysis. It can pull conditions of patients out of medical text. Transcribe. So this is to go from like audio recordings to text that then we can send into Comprehend. Amazon Forecast. This is the forecasting engine behind Amazon.com and how they're managing the inventory in their warehouses. All you have to do is feed forecast time series data and other data to enrich that set of time series data, and then you can start to ask for inferences of future states. We're going to talk about a customer that we're helping with forecast here in a little bit. TextTrack, another interesting service. Easiest way to think about TextTrack, this is OCR on steroids, but that doesn't really do its justice. TextTrack can pull meaning from the document that we send to it. So for instance, if we send an invoice into TextTrack, it can tell us what's the SKU, what was the quantity ordered, what was the unit price, what was the total price for that line item in the order. Amazon Fraud Detector. This is a brand new service that Amazon launched last December. So if you're in a business where you have to be scanning and looking for potential fraud, so an e-commerce business, a bank doing credit card processing, Fraud Detector is now a service that if you load it with past data that had fraud in it that you can identify as fraud, it will learn from that and now be able to detect fraud going forward. Amazon recognition. This is both video and still picture analysis of a photo. So it can tell us a lot of interesting things. It can do celebrity identification. And then we get into Deep Lens, Deep Racer, and Deep Composer. We're going to talk about those a little bit later on too. But what's important to understand, all of these services listed here are an API call away to leverage in the work that we help do with our customers. Let's take a look at how we're helping some of our customers leverage these technologies and what it's meaning to their business. If you've ever been involved in a multi-state move, chances are you've had a moving company come and inventory your house. And this is not, the best thing that you really want to deal with. Maybe you're 6 weeks away from making a move. You're trying to sort out what's going on in your house. The last thing you want to do is schedule time for some guy to come, walk around your house with a clipboard or an iPad and figure out what your inventory is going to be. So a small startup company in upstate New York, they had an idea and they've built a system that uses your mobile phone. All you do is you go room by room of your house and using their mobile app, just scan around and make a quick video of the room. You upload that into the AWS cloud, and they're using Amazon Simple Storage Service and Amazon Recognition to do this work. And they dynamically build the whole manifest and determine how many boxes need to be sent to your house when the movers come, how much space it's going to take in the truck, how much it's going to weigh. So like in this still photo, we can tell there's a couch, there's a table, there's a chair, there's an ottoman, there's a plant, there's 3 pictures and an area rug. Okay, it'll give an estimation how much that's going to weigh in the truck. And now you spent 5 minutes to give the movers the information that they need. You didn't have to arrange for anybody to come to your house or deal with that in a stressful enough situation when you're preparing for a multi-state move. So this is an example of a startup that's totally disrupting the moving industry with a very simple application. There was no PhD, data scientist involved in this project. It was just some software developers leveraging some services from AWS. Another company that we're working with is called 5x5 Technologies. 5x5 uses drones to fly paths around cell towers to create what we call a digital twin, a 3D digital twin of that cell tower. So imagine the drone goes around, it's capturing a couple thousand high-res 2D photos off of the onboard camera. That all gets uploaded into AWS, and then we create an engineering accurate 3D model. So we're talking a 32nd of an inch on a 500-foot tall tower is the type of resolution that we're able to achieve. So we're converting 2D to 3D and producing a multi-gigapixel image, 3D image that we now can interact with in the web browser. But you're like, where's AI and ML fit in that? Well, when a drone operator is getting ready to fly a tower and he's checking out his system, the camera may start to take some pictures, or maybe in the flight path, the shutter gets triggered and takes some pictures of things that we don't want to see. Maybe it's the grass as the drone is setting on the ground. And photos that don't contain parts of a cell tower confuse the rendering engine. So working with AWS, we were able to develop an AI ML model that would sort photos, and it would sort them into 2 buckets, those that had parts of a cell tower in it and those that didn't. So now automation is going through and sorting out these photos, which then makes the processing pipeline run smoother, faster, and give us a better result. Where else can this company use this? So working with cell towers, you can imagine things like rust and cracks and crack growth are kind of important on these structures. So we're looking towards the future where we can train AI and ML models to look for a crack, but then know the next time that tower is flown, maybe 6 months later, identify the crack and be able to tell us, did the crack grow from the last time? Or maybe something in the southeast, unfortunately, maybe a hurricane comes through, fly the tower, identify, do we have any structural issues with this tower from the after effects of the hurricane? Or again, has a crack grown since the last time? Do we have any rust developing from salt water getting onto the structure? So this can be very powerful. And the thing is, to have a human go out to this dangerous environment, climb these towers is very, very man-hour intensive versus having a machine do this work for us. Sentiment analysis. So this is a fun and interesting one, and we actually did this at a previous Tech Talk, where we wanted to capture the real-time emotions of the people in the audience. So how did we do this? This is the complete architecture that we used to capture this. So we leveraged the Amazon Deep Lens camera, which we'll talk about here in a minute. We had a facial recognition model running on it. So in other words, it was just looking at the audience and detecting faces. About 30 times a minute, it would upload a JPEG of the faces in the audience to an S3 bucket. Then we'd use a Lambda function to retrieve the image, send it to Amazon Recognition, and publish the metrics off of that file, off of that photo to a CloudWatch, to a graph, essentially. Okay, this is all the architecture it took to do this. There was no PhD computer scientists, data scientists involved in this. This was a software development activity that we put 2 of our developers on that took between 2 and 4 hours for them to implement. And it costs all of a couple dollars an hour to run the system. So what do you get out of it? So here is the graph of the reactions of the audience to the talk. And the top line is what you're really looking at or looking for. So this is the happy line, right? And so what you can see here is the first speaker was going along, things are going really well. Then I started to do my talk, and I worked to elicit some strong responses from my audience at the time so that we could see a sharp decline in the graph. And then it started to grow back up after about the 1430 mark. So again, this was sentiment analysis with the audience, in attendance at one of our tech talks. And the funny thing is the speakers didn't know that this was going to happen, and the speakers later in the day became very concerned about how the system was rating, how they were speaking at the session. But again, low cost. It was a development team activity to actually set this up, and we're able to do it very, very rapidly. Another thing that we're doing that I mentioned, using this idea of forecasting. So obviously we're all in the midst of COVID. And so we're working with one of our customers. Can we use Amazon Forecast to help chart a path back from COVID for this company? So what we did is we loaded several years of time series data about the performance of the company. Then we loaded data about stock market and target industries that they operate in. And then now we've started to ask the model, okay, based upon other company stock performance, how could Transcat themselves recover from COVID? Or we can also ask another way and say, how about projecting recovery of industries that Transcat is tightly aligned with, and how will that impact Transcat's recovery from this? So this is very pertinent today for a lot of organizations that are trying to figure out the path forward from COVID. How do you get started in this, right? So you got to we want to make it fun to learn AI and ML. And that's what these 3 services from AWS are really about. So Deep Racer, Deep Lens, and Deep Composer. Deep Racer is something that came out about 1.5 years, 2 years ago from AWS. And it's the whole idea of making it fun to learn about building models that do autonomous driving of a car. And this is using a piece of machine learning called reinforcement learning. So the model you're building and in the simulator is you're rewarding the model if it makes a good choice and sort of giving it a not so good bit of feedback if it does something you don't want it to do. So in Deep Racer, you're trying to award it for staying close to the dotted center line. We've hosted a couple of these events now, both at our office, and we did a battle of the schools with some of the universities pitted against each other in our area. There is a virtual race league for this that AWS is sponsoring. They hold races every now and then, and I think one of the AWS solution architects actually has a track in his basement, and they did a virtual event about a month ago in his basement where people could submit their models. He loaded them on the cars and sent them around the track to see how it would work. Deep Lens, this is the tool that we used in our Buffalo Tech Talk where I showed you the sentiment analysis. All Deep Lens is a camera and a small computer that can run the Linux operating system that we can put deep learning models on top of, so facial recognition. There's a whole website where there was a hackathon done on what could people do with Deep Lens, what could they teach models running on the Deep Lens to do. Some really interesting things like doing translation of American Sign Language. Another person built a system that their kids could hold the page of a book up to the camera and it would read it back to them. Deep Composer, this is something that just came out in December at reInvent. This is the idea of exposing people to what's called generative AI. So it's a keyboard combined with a generative AI model that you put down a couple bars of a riff, give that off to the AI model, and it will iterate and create new music around that. And you have knobs and things that you can control to help you generate how you want that model to go. So in wrapping up, to get started in this, establish a culture where you don't have to be an expert, and you can let the people on your teams go experiment with this stuff. It's extremely cost effective to go out and try these services because, again, it's a pay per use model. If you're not using it, you're not paying for it. You don't have to be an expert in this. This is just a software API call away to leverage these services. Experiment. Leverage the data that you have internally. Can you measure the sentiment of your customers? If you're in retail, do you have customer reviews and you really want to know what the sentiment of those are? There's other things that you can do to discover the trends of your data that are locked up in your data lake or your data warehouses. And collaborate. Purchase a few deep racers, deep lens cameras, or deep composers for your team. Set up some time, maybe on Friday afternoons once a month, where teams can go and play with these tools and see what they can create. Or organize a hackathon for your development team and see what they can come up with these tools. So that's it for me. I hope that this was helpful and informative, and that it will help you down your AI journey, and we'd love to be there to help you along the way. Courtney, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott, so much. That was great. I have a couple of questions for you if you have a few minutes.
Definitely.
And awesome. If anyone else has any questions that you would like me to get to, feel free to throw them in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and I'll make sure to keep an eye on those. One question for you, Scott. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges that teams are facing right now in regards to incorporating AI ML into their strategy?
I think a little bit of it is the unknown, not knowing how to get started. Assuming that you have to have a lot of data to be able to get started with this. You don't. The more data you have, maybe the better the resolution that your models begin to give you. We're doing a proof of concept for a customer right now where we're going to do it off of just a couple of hundred photos to identify a very specific box moving down a conveyor. So we can start simple and grow and iterate that model. The other thing is, don't be afraid to just dive into it. If you have an idea, go find one of these services from AWS that's a best fit. Don't assume that you're going to have to go build this from scratch in SageMaker. See if there's any of the services from AWS that you can get started with to at least prove your idea and concept out.
Awesome. And what do you see as a trend, kind of the future of AI ML with companies? Are you thinking this is something that companies are going to quickly adopt? Or do you think this is something that they're going to take their time?
Great question. So I think right now we're sort of in this hype cycle for AI ML where it's that steep growth. I think we're very early in it. I think that there's several really leaders in this, but I think a lot of companies are still trying to figure out what this means. I actually think that things that have just happened in the last couple of months with COVID and the virus, as companies are trying to figure out how they recover from this, how they grow and move forward, that this could actually accelerate the adoption of some of these AI and ML ideas, because companies are sitting on a lot of data. That data could inform them of how to change the course of their business, or where do they need to make a change in their business potentially. I also think that you're seeing the startups start to leverage this to differentiate themselves from other organizations. And this is going to be why some of the legacy organizations are going to have to start adopting these ideas to keep themselves differentiated from everybody else.
Awesome. Great insight. Thank you so much, Scott, for tuning in.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.